Alright, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classic Known Classics. It's episode number 3393, Doubleshot number 3287. I have a DC trade and a Marvel trade. Yeah, it's been a while since I bought a Marvel trade. Both these two basically I wanted my hands on, purely because I want one because I did already review one of the parts of the story. When I get to it, I'm going to skip it. This one in particular, I want to talk about because this one probably recently just came out. And currently, the guy who took over the book afterwards for his next story arc is still in the book. Yep, has not wrapped up the story arc just yet. It's been going now for quite a while, actually. So we have Superman Action Comics Superstars Volume 2. Yeah, this comes after the Phantoms trade and the Supergirl Universe trade. This book collects issues 1082 to 1086. Now, the first three issues of this book, 1082, 1084, was written by, I know it's a Superstar Initiative, but this guy is not a superstar writer. You would think, big name writer, maybe he's popular. Not this guy. No, not this guy. Purely because basically any book this guy has done, it doesn't sell. Like, the only book that barely sold was I Am Batman. And that featured Jace Fox, a character who appeared maybe once or twice outside of his own title. A character nobody cared about. This guy even did a run for Black Panther, believe it or not, that nobody talked about. This stuff had gorgeous covers. Yeah. And the only reason they claim he's a superstar is because he wrote 12 Years a Slave. Yep, that's the only reason why. The story itself is not bad per se, but I would not put John Ridley here. I would have put maybe like Ryan Pera. He's a much better writer. Or at least he actually puts out stuff that's popular. And of course, the last two issues done by Gail Simone, which I think this was her third return. I think it was her second return to title because she did some previous issues under the when the first set of issues came out for the Supers Initiative. So this first story arc here, which John really, like I mentioned, he does 1082, 1084, and Gail Simone does the last two, which is 1085, 1086. The two artists on here are Anka Midoriya and Galvin Gautry. The cover art is done by Yannick Predict, met the guy Cool Guy Person, and Ira Prado. So yeah, this three-parter is all about Major Disaster. And weirdly, I was kind of surprised to see this with this three-parter. They referenced the previous volume for Harley Quinn because this is a weird thing with this title. Volumes 2 and 3... Excuse me, here's something interesting about those two volumes. Well, let's look more at the first three volumes of Harley Quinn. The first volume was definitely part of the DCU, no problem. Volume 2 was set in its own continuity, just vaguely referencing what happened in other titles. Volume 3 was kind of the same thing, was doing its own thing, didn't have the reference titles. Volume 4 is more integrated into the DC canon, because the fact the character interacts with Batman a lot more, and it's more fully integrated than it was before, and plus has more cohesion per se. What Seth Phillips wrote the title was really good. Tini Howard had a very bizarre run in the title, and the current writer, I'm not sure what the heck this writer's even doing, because the writer's not done very much for DC. So the whole thing is Major Disaster is involved with a bank robbery. Yes, a bank robbery. And they have referenced here an old issue of Action Comics in this issue, which I was surprised they referenced even that. So you have Chief of Police here, and of course, here's Major Disaster. By the way, that's his pre-Flashpoint costume. Yeah, they put him back in this thing, and of course, they chat for a bit like, oh, something's going on with him, and here we go. Here's the first editor's note here. Action Comics number 783. Which, if you're curious, how long ago was this issue came out? Like, this was like, oh my gosh, like 300 issues ago. Yes, seriously. 300 issues later, it seems like about 30 years ago, but I'm like, damn. I did not expect, basically, this to be referenced. I mean, this is like pre-800, mind you, yes. My mouse does this mysterious thing where it just loves doing this thing where it doesn't like to be... My computer does this thing where it half the time does like reading my mouse for some weird reason, so I have to keep... I have to turn it on and off. So yeah, then of course he questions it, and then he goes to visit, did I mention about Atomic Skull, which is, this is more fairly recent. He had to go out to jail because he was briefly reformed. Yeah, he was reforming the Superwoman title. So, yeah, this is kind of surprising. So John Ridley is referencing issue not written by him. Oh no! This, in case you're curious though, does it happen where a writer in current day references issue they didn't write? It doesn't happen very often. It very rarely ever does. Like in the case of like someone like Donny Coates, the guy loves referencing his previous work. He loves doing that. Al Ewing does that too, where he references his own work. Okay, so the answer to the question, how long ago did 783 came out? 783 came out in 2001. And you're like, really? So you have a comic that came out 24 years ago. And the thing is, this is something. The fact that this comic actually referenced this issue about Superman having offered to all these villains, made a disaster, they want to take up the offer to join the Justice League. And this is shocking. Oh, by the way, who wrote this issue? Joe Kelly. Yeah, as in the guy who currently writes Amazing Spider-Man right now. You're like, really? So, the current writer of Amazing Spider-Man gets one of his previous works referenced in an issue of... Well, he wrote an issue... He was one of the Action Comics. One of a lot of writers for this comic book. A lot of writers. Yeah. I don't think anyone was expecting this. So, then we have Superman interviewing someone called Mighty Bruce. And of course, the Chief gets questioned about some of the stuff here. And then we see Scorch, another character from that very issue. Yeah. It says 6 points before the event's absolute power, but referencing the events of that issue was something. And also, this comic brought in the character of Scorched. Yeah, this actually was Scorch's very first appearance post-Flashpoint. Yes. You're like, really? Yeah. And by the way, this woman was created by J. DeMatteis. You're like, wait a minute, as the guy who wrote a lot of Spider-Man comics and did JLI? Yeah, he created this woman. She showed up part of the Emperor Joker stuff. You're like, really? Yeah. And her appearances have been not much over the years at all. I mean, she's not the big a villain per se, but I'm glad the fact they referenced the fact that she was offered, and of course she turned down being part of the Justice League, which is something. And then Superman's attack, and then he goes visit Atomic Skull. Of course, yes, he is basically talked to by Batman, and then he goes visit Atomic Skull when he was part of the unit run by Maggie Sawyer. This was the whole thing with the Dan Jorkin stuff. If you're really curious, what was Scorch's last appearance part of this very comic book? Her last appearance, I'm going to attempt to look up here. Let's see. I don't know what's that one. No. Nope. So her last no appearance to date was actually in Teen Titans Volume 3, issue 52, which that came back in 2007. And this comic came out at the start of this very year. Yes, if I can get back to my thing here. Come on. Come on. Anyways, yeah. So, they went back to a suit villain. Yeah, and then of course, basically, Scorch kind of gets involved and gets transported Superman to meet Bruno Magnum, a character who first appeared in the issue of Harley, who basically in this continuity, yeah, this I think is probably the first time I fought Superman in quite a while. Yep. So, and then we do these aliens. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, and the Harley Quinn reference is coming up. We're meeting up with Penny Booker. Who is Penny Booker, you might ask? Minor Disaster, the daughter of Major Disaster. And this is when they reference Harley Quinn 54. This was the previous volume for the book before the current volume. Which was something, they referenced that. Then, yeah. I guess I figured out why not, and then the story ends. Quite interesting story here, per se. It is interesting, though. John Ridley is referencing stuff written by other writers. Like, I think the Harley Quinn issue at time was written by Christos Gage. So, he's not only Joe Kelly in this brief run, but he also referenced Christos Gage, which was interesting, to say the least. Yeah, not something anybody was expecting, per se, when it comes to this book. Scorch, per se, is not a character that, well, she's not that really big of a character, per se, but I'm sure that probably J. Matthias probably did. I don't know if he knows the fact that characters brought in the current continuity. Yeah. So, the thing is, Bruno Magnum, this is weird for him. So, he made his first appearance in Batwoman Volume 2, Issue 0. This was, of course, the 0-year stuff. But this has been ignored when he appeared in Superman and Lois. Then he appeared in Superman, Lois, and Clark. He appeared in first two issues of City Boy. Yes. Which came out just a couple years prior to this coming out. So, at the time this was released, of course, he does appear in an issue of Truth and Justice. That came out in 2021. But this was probably his first appearance in 2 years. Yeah, first appearance in 2 years, but first time appearing in a Superman comic since Superman, Lois, and Clark. That was the last time he physically appeared in the comic. Yeah. And then we have the two-parter, Solitude. This is the Gail Simone one. We have Perry just... by the way, he's still in charge of the planet. Despite the fact when these issues came out, he was not in charge of the planet. The planet itself was actually... He was not editor-in-chief at this point. He was actually running for mayor. A story that has had a very slow build for the past couple years in comics. And then I think it was an issue recently where they finally brought it up. And mostly put for this two-parter, we have Superman versus Kilgore. Who is Kilgore, I might ask? Well, basically, this was a character who was a Flash villain who was brought in the current continuity by John Stamper Jr. Yes. And this is something interesting, though. Like, so he did appear in a Superman comic prior to this one. where it was, let's see, Kilgore City. Yeah, then he basically, prior to this, did appear in that Superman Red and Blue issue, but you can think John Stamp bring him in here. So the whole thing of this one, just him just doing no reporting stuff, and they were a cybernized polar bear, and it's a very interesting two-parter, I gotta admit that. Having Kilgore pop up in this thing was something. Yes, a character who originally, who in this continuity, first person he fought was Cyborg. Yep. You say, oh, he's a cyber villain? Not necessarily. He was originally a Flash villain. And those of you curious, who created this character, you might ask? Since it's been Volume 2, Issue 3 for The Flash, he's a creation of Mike Baron. Yep, the legendary Mike Baron. He created this character. Then Superman just deals with him, and of course he has these cybernized killer whales. It's a very, very fun two-parter. Oh, self-contained. And of course you have Superman hugging his beautiful wife Lois. And that's it. That's the second trade for Superstars. I give this one roughly a 8.5 out of 10. I thought the two-part, I would say of the two, the John Ridley was very interesting, to say the least. Those of you curious, though, is the Super Initiative done? This, by far, I believe, is the end of the Superstar Initiative. Yes. Because those of you curious, like, okay, so what happens next? The start of Mark Waid's run for the comic, which is still going, by the way. Yeah, kind of interesting he's writing this comic. That he's writing Action Comics. I mean, as of the most recent issue, which was 1093, he is still the writer of the comic. So, yeah, basically, we're at the point where, just before we get to I think Mark Waid is now officially the regular writer for the book. Kind of interesting, to say the least. Especially since the run now is going now for, let's see, this was 1086, so it's been officially been releasing now for about 7 issues. Yep, 7 issues, so not very long. So it might be a bit of time before we get a chance to do another Action Comics trade for recent stuff. Yeah, but was Super Initiative successful? They didn't choose like, you probably are thinking, like, what was the purpose of the Superstar Initiative? Having popular creators work on these comics. So basically we just had just 4 story arcs. We had I Bizarro, Challenge the Stars, Force Major, and Solitude. The first 3 were quick 3-parters, and now this one is just a quick 2-parter. You had Jason Aaron to start with, and then you had Gail Simone did the second story arc, and then you had John Ridley, and then they brought Gail Simone, probably because basically people do like the writer per se. And I think this 2-parter Solitude, I think this may be her most recent DC Comics work to date. Okay, so the answer to the obvious question some people might have about Gail Simone. What was the first issue of Action Comics she ever wrote that was released under her name? The very first one was issue 827, which was released in 2005. Yeah, 20 years ago. And it was actually in her last issue she ever first wrote, which was 835, this is where they basically bring in Livewire. Yeah, kind of interesting though the fact that her last issue, which came out in 2006, so roughly, you could say that her return last year was first time in 18 years she wrote the title. It was kind of interesting to see her come back to do these 2 issues. Oh, it wasn't Gail Simone. It was actually, sorry about that. It was actually G. Will Wilson. Yes, G. Will Wilson. I thought it was Gail Simone. My mistake. This is, I think, the first. Now, she is definitely superstar rated. I do credit her being one, because she's really good. Plus, also, she's doing the Poison Ivy series right now, which is 39 issues in. Yeah, I think people are surprised at the fact how long this title's been going on for. It's not ended yet. You're like, really? It's not over? No. No, it's not. So yeah, do I think to do any more superstar stuff? I have no idea. It depends on what DC wants to do. Depends on whatever Mark Waid finishes the way he wants to. Because right now we're in the Superboy flashback here. Alright, so let's talk about this crossover. X-Manhunted. The second crossover of the From the Ashes initiative for the X-Men comics. Which, all these comics tie in this thing. This is what we have. We have Uncanny X-Men, Volume 6, Issue 11, NYX, Volume 2, Issue 9, Storm, Volume 5, Issue 9, X-Men, Volume 7, 13, X-Factor, Volume 5, Number 8, Exceptional X-Men, Number 7, X-Force, Volume 7, Number 6, Number 9, and X-Het Omega, Number 1. The creative teams on these issues. You have Gail Simone, who does Uncanny X-Men. Jed MacKay does X-Men, except X-Men is Eve Ewing. Storm is Maria Ottawa. Jed MacKay does, obviously, X-Men. X-Factor is Mark Russell. Jackson Lazy and Colin Kelly does NYX. Jeffrey Thorne does X-Force. I think the X-Manhunt Omega is Gail Simone and the Raider of Storm. Yes. So, basically, oh, by the way, of all these titles, Uncanny X-Men would last another 9 issues before going hiatus because of Age of X-Men. Not Age of X-Men, Age of Revolution, excuse me. NYX will be canceled with the very next issue. Storm managed to last for 6 more issues, and then ended to be on a mini-series, and then it was like Storm and I think it was like Storm and Rogue. I think it was like Storm and Phoenix. I think it was, where after that book wraps up, they're relaunching the title for some weird reason instead of like keeping the number going for some reason. I'm not sure why. X-Men itself would have another 6 issues come out before this book goes on hiatus, and it comes back. It's going to come back next year. Don't worry about that. X-Factor would end 2 issues later. Exceptional X-Men is on hiatus. Yeah, that's kind of weird with Exceptional X-Men. It's an interesting title. But the thing is, despite like everything else has come back next year after the Age of Revolution, this title, it's unknown what the future of this title is. Because Eve Ewing, from what I heard from New York Comic Con, said absolutely nothing if this book is canceled. It just... Yeah, it... Okay, so is the title ended? Apparently it is. It's officially finished with issue 13. Yeah, 13 is apparently the final issue. though it gets relaunched under the X-Men stuff. Though, no future for this title. Nope. Not really. I'll talk about eventually the title itself when I talk about the first trade. X-Force will end with the following issue. So it's like, out of all of the series attached to this, part of this crossover, NYX, X-Factor, and X-Force would pretty much all end like not long after the story wraps up. And I had to be right back. Much better. Much better indeed. Okay. Sorry about that. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Alright, so. Let's talk about this crossover. Which, by the way, this trade paperback was $24. Yeah. Which, not surprising given how really thick this book is. We have roughly 8 comics in here. Yes, 8. Though, out of all the parts, part of this thing, Exceptional X-Men is technically a tie-in. It's not part of the main line of stories, because basically at X-Factor, the next part is actually an X-Force. You're like, really? Yeah, really. So, and here's something really weird about this story. This is like not long after they just did another crossover, that being Assault and Greymilkin. And you're like, really? Because that's the weird thing about this crossover. That a lot of people are like, why the heck would they have another crossover? Like, if you're curious though, it had not been very long. Like, since the previous crossover, not even just a few months. Like, I think anybody reading X-Men comics recently probably realized that, oh crap, we have another crossover. And you're like, what? Another one? Yes. Another one. As for, now, the last one, I enjoyed the last crossover. I would have thought, though, they would have waited a little bit. By the way, excuse me. So, let me point out something about the Rain and Greymilkin. That was basically the previous crossover. That started X-Men issue 8. That was part 1. Part 2 is King X-Men, volume 6, issue 7. Part 3 was X-Men volume 7, volume number 9. And the finale for this was King X-Men, volume 6, number 8. This is not even 3 months later. Yeah, 3 months later we have another crossover. And you're like, really? Why the heck would Marvel do this for? After just taking just 2 months off from doing crossovers, we have another one. And you're like, what in the world? I think a lot of people were just like, we just did a crossover. just a few months ago. And now we have another one? Why? But of course, they set this up so we start off basically. Now, apparently, this particular crossover leads to a cosmic crossover. You're like, what? Seriously? Yeah, it does. So, I'll explain it later. So we have basically these insurgents trying to overthrow the Shia Empire, and Deathbird is guarding her niece. So then we have stuff at Great Mocha because they're still recovering from basically the attack by the X-Men because they want to get their friends back. But Xavier's here. So, and then apparently, like, it seems like they're about to sedate him, and then all of a sudden, basically, his daughter's asking for him. So, all the X-Men doing their own thing. This mostly focusing on the Louisiana X-Men mostly. After seeing hallucination of the original X-Men, and then seeing Wolverine, and then of course Xavier just escapes, and that was basically part one of the story. And then we cut to NYX. That's part two of the story, where Xavier's here with a few individuals and meets up with the cast NYX. And you know the weird thing is, apparently that Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing decided to have the numbering for this book continue as part of the anniversary of Giants as X-Men. But had Ms. Marvel basically part of a story she was not originally part of. Yes. Yes. So basically David is telling him to get out because he doesn't trust him. The Tucker, and of course, I think this will be Null, who's bigger now. And apparently Ms. Marvel wants to join up too. It's really weird with the whole thing with her. And then we have, randomly for some weird reason, I'm not sure why, they always thought it'd be a good idea to basically do a nod to something from the 90s. The boob butt pose. With the whole rubber spine thing. Except it's Xavier. Because, of course, him, Null, and Ms. Marvel confronted by frickin' Mojo. Yes, Mojo, who not been seen in a little while. Oh, the fabulous Miss Marvel. Yeah, his appearance was completely random. And then Xavier, this is kind of weird for him. He just goes into this room, knocks up, and of course, mentioned, oh yeah, Doc Doom saved the world. Yes. So then he goes to this room while Miss Marvel's taking on Mojo, just so he can retrieve his helmet from the Krakoa era. Yes, by the way, this has not been seen since the start of the Fall of X storyline. The one that the crossover ended this whole thing. Yeah, and then of course, basically he gets it back for some reason. Mojo does this whatever. And you think, oh, continue with one person being possessed. Next Mojo City, that was actually the last issue of the book, by the way. The next issue about yeah, because NYX, out of all the titles from the Ashes, this one, from what I've heard, is considered to be the, like, and I've read it, the first issue when this came out. This book is bad. One of them, no one bought it. In the case of another book, the writer had no idea the book was ending. He was caught completely off guard. And then we cut to Storm. Yes, Storm. Here with Strong Guy, and of course you have the Thundercloud thing, and basically it feels like a Noble Storm issue, and now we just happen to have Xavier here, and then we have the X-Men from the Jed McKay run. We have ID, who I think she's known as Tempest now. ID, Psylocke, Cyclops, Quintire, Magic, and the Juggernaut. Yep. And of course, deal with the conversation with the X-Men. You probably think, does this lead to the X-Men issue? Yes, it does. And then, of course, Xavier has to pay a visit to, after brainwashing Beast, they go to Utopia. Yep, Utopia. Which, last in this place was seen, off the top of my head, I think it was seen previously in Deadpool. I'm trying to look up and see what was prior to this very crossover. Okay, so the last time was seen was actually in the finale for Secret Empire. And this issue came out like just this year. So this is the first time it had been seen in 8 years, this place. And they're just here because, well, there is something here that is explored in... And then, of course, you're bringing more of the Jed MacKay X-Men. Where they have flashback to his time with the Xavier Institute. And then we have a homage to a classic X-Men cover, which on that cover was Wolverine on this X, which they also spoofed in Deadpool Wolverine. So, and then we lead into X Factor showing up, which leads into the X Factor issue. Yep. Like, really? Yeah, really, about this mysterious egg. And we're going to find out what the heck the egg is, but not yet. Because, of course, we have to throw in the X Factor X, which was not part of the story. Nope, it's just a tie-in. They probably threw it in here because it takes place between the X-Force issue and the X Factor and X-Force issue. So, Exceptional X-Men is basically the Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost book, where you have her basically flashback time with Cyclops, and her just have the sequence where she's training with her new X-Men. And if you're curious, what the heck this is going, like, basically this issue she's informed that that Xavier's broken out. Like, and then Mr. Sinister shows up and he's a villain in the title. And you probably thinking, reading this issue, what was the point of this issue? Just that Emma Frost gets informed Xavier has escaped. For being a tie-in, it does nothing to the main story. Nothing. You would have thought, it does something. Not really, no. And now we're on to X-Force, which just was the penultimate issue because the very next issue was the last one. Now, if I heard when this book ended just this year, Geoffrey Thorne had no idea the book was ending. No idea. Now, of the titles that got canceled, I felt this actually was a really good title. I actually enjoyed X-Force under Geoffrey Thorne. X Factor was just weird. So they, of course, by the way, they're based out of the Drake Eagle Plaza, which kind of weird that they brought this place back. Given the fact the place was destroyed and it's not the X-Men. How the heck the place is rebuilt is completely questionable. Because last time was seen was actually in Powers of X. It's about it was destroyed Astonish the X-Men. It's a old X-Men location. Do I think that have it based here was a good idea? Yes, definitely. Actually, we're sages. And then we have they go to South America, where Sage is putting together the team to deal with. And then we finally unveil what's inside of this egg. And what's inside of this egg is surprising, to say the least. So, and then we have John Wraith appear in the book. Yeah, a guy who was a part of this. We finally unveil who's inside this egg. And inside this egg is none other than a naked Leandra. Okay. I think a lot of people read this probably at the time like, wait, I thought she died. She's been dead since like 2008. Yeah. She was killed by a freaking raptor who, get this, have framed Darkhawk in the story for murdering her. Yes. And somehow, some way, Krakoa brought back Leandra, even though that she was never clearly identified as mutant, even though maybe she is. Kind of interesting about her back here. Because just came out just this year. She had been dead for almost 20 years. So I guess that Jeffrey Thorne is like, bring her back. Okay, so then of course they had a makeout session. And by the way, she's kissing while she's butt naked. Then of course she puts some clothes on, obviously. Then we have more battling in South America, and then we lead to the final issue, where all the X teams are gathered together to deal with Xavier. We have stuff with Storm here because Storm's very corrupt this issue. Miguel Simone. They fight these beings. Really epic story here. So basically, it's like Scott's like, you should be in jail because what happened with Fall of X. Yeah, at the scene of hallucinations. So they reveal exactly a retcon that a lot of people were basically just perplexed about this happening. So then Scott getting stabbed by Wolverine. So yeah, and then of course basically Xavier's telling Scott build a bloody school. And it's just, and Pete saying, please build another school. I should point out though, Scott's team is based in Alaska. Wolverine's team is based in Louisiana, probably because basically that Rogue and Gambit from there. And he goes out to space, and this leads into the Jonathan Hickman Imperial. So it is revealed in here of the reasoning why Xavier. This actually was a big wreck. This is probably one of the most weirdest retcons I have ever heard of. So the reason why, throughout the entire Nick Core era and this, of why he's acting so irrational, of why he's going to be so drastically different from what he was prior to Okakora stuff. The reason why he was acting this way, and this might surprise you. So the reason why he was acting this way was because he had a freaking brain tumor. You know, the world's most powerful telepath gets a freaking tumor, and that's why he's acting completely irrational for the past several years. Like, that's the reason why? A lot of people probably like, really? That's your reasoning for why this character is going to be so out of character? Why he's going to be like the X-Men's biggest villain? We're going to be like a freaking villain for the past several years? Like, since 2019 he went like this? I think everybody was just so shocked the fact that that was the reason why. And this is just a way to take Xavier off the X-Men comics just so he can go out to space and save his daughter. Yep. Yes. And I mentioned, oh yeah, his wife. Okay, so that's actually incorrect. I'm not really sure why they refer these two as married, because it was this happened during I think it was during Grant Morrison's run. It was one of the last times the Imperial Guard showed up at the Xavier. I think it was either Grant Morrison or Chuck Austin. So these two are not legally married. They may love each other, yes, but here's the thing. Xavier and Landry are divorced because of stuff related to the X-Men. And the marriage was annulled by her people. Yes, seriously, that was the reason for this. And it's like, I think maybe Gilson probably either didn't know that per se, or something. It is just so perplexing that she's referred to as his wife, despite the fact they were not married. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And if you're really curious, so So, she died in War of Kings issue 4. Yes, issue 4. Which came out in, actually was 2009. So, it was on June 3rd, 2009 when this was released. So this woman remained dead for 16 years. Because her death was like because here's the weird thing about this story. It's like any deaths we have happened during War of Kings. Yeah, let just basically in the last few years just bring back everybody who freaking died. Excuse me, like, really? Yes, really. Because she was the first person, she was one of the people who died in this story. There are many others who come in the story, like a character called Hobgoblin, this was the alien version. A character called Nightshade. Yeah, she got killed off too. And that was the opening issue. Issue 2, no deaths. Issue 3, they killed off a Smasher. The third guy to become Smasher gets killed off in third issue. Issue 4, they kill off Leandra. In issue 5, they kill off a character called Araki. Well, actually, he came back to life somehow. He was actually a longtime minister of the, well, he did kind of come back in Realm King's Imperial Guard. Yeah, somehow he came back alive. How he came back is completely questionable. And they killed off a character called Black Cloak. Yes, Black Cloak. He's still dead. So out of the many people who died in this story, at least 3 major characters who got killed off in the story, that being Leandra, Black Bolt, and Vulcan, all died. And they've all since come back. Hickman brought back Black Bolt and FF. He also brought back Vulcan in the pages of X-Men. And now we have Leandra come back, this time by Gail Simone. So I guess a lot of people read this crossover like, then what was the point? Kill these major characters in the first place, you could bring them back. I mean, at least in case of, here's the thing with Black Bolt. Black Bolt was only dead for 2 years. Vulcan was dead for like over a decade. Yeah, he was dead for over 10 years. And Leandra stayed dead the longest at 16 years. 16 years remained dead. And now she's back. Yeah, and now she became part of the Imperial crossover, which is what basically this whole thing was leading toward. Yes, I kid you not, they led into another crossover. Well, at least it's something that's different. And apparently, Leandra and Give Kissing is response to Karen Gillian, teacher of his career-owned power fantasy referencing the X-Men. And now we have the event Imperial, which I think has since wrapped up. Yeah. They have wrapped up the story. Yeah. And you're probably thinking, does Xavier play a role in the story? Not really, no. It's kind of interesting, the fact that they did this. It's like, oh, we have to take Xavier off the board for Imperial. And it's like, I guess, heck, it's like, yeah, this whole thing was leading to stuff related to, yeah, and it leads this very event itself, which is kind of interesting. But role they play a very small role in this entire story. Yeah, a very small role. That's kind of the problem with this story. It's like, yeah, it's like we build up to this whole thing, and now it's like, what's the point of basically, like, of the story? Like, does leave anything for the X-Men to do? Not much. Except the fact having their titles get briefly, like, some put in hiatus. It's like, there was no cross to happen. At least they waited more than 3 months afterwards. So, this was a... You can describe this as tying up a loose end prior to the Age of Evolution stuff starting. That's probably the best way you can describe Manhunt. Yep. X-Manhunt, okay? But yeah, this video isn't going very long. I need to move on to something else, okay? So, excuse me. That's pretty much it. Particular video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. So, next up is going to be Rama Halfkin. Next video. Bye.